Welcome to Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo, brought to you by Holy Chuck Burgers. Our business is burgers.
Good morning, Katarina Witt. There's no such thing as bad boys, only boys with bad hair.
Sponsored by Maxwell's Clothiers, your bespoke tailor since 1961. And now, your host of Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo, Chuck Bastie. And welcome back to another episode of Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo. I'm your producer, Cam LaRock, and of course, I'm with Chuck Bastie. Chuck, how's it going?
Good, buddy. How are we doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited for the show. Another goalie-themed show. I know you love your tendies.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you're, we got to take care of our peeps, right? Like,
Exactly.
you know, this guy here is just way ahead of my curve as far as talent and athleticism and height, and I could go on and on and on because, like, I'm the old school goalie, and he's the new generation as well. So I'll defer to Jamie Phillips.
Yeah, I love to hear from the goalies. I played out. I was a forward or defenseman, switched between the years, but it's cool to hear the perspective from inside the crease. It's different. I never realized the things I'm learning, but yeah.
You know, and you bring up a great point because Jamie has this take, which is how I found him on Instagram. And I just started watching his content on Instagram, and I'm like, wow, man, this guy actually quantifies, like, takes the bullshit and the emotional talk right out of, like, feelings and opinions and points of view, and actually comes down and just quantifies the science behind goaltending. So I reached out to him as well and just said, hey, listen, just love to have you on the show, just so we can share more of your knowledge with a lot of young tendies out there, and then give them a little bit more direction on how they can control the controllables inside of their own talents. And the science behind it really goes a long way with really giving these kids the tools that they need to be great goalies.
Yeah, so without further ado, we'll bring Jamie into the show and we'll hear from him.
Yeah. Jamie Phillips, you're the goaltending coach for Michigan Tech. I was going to say Michigan State, which would have been a huge difference. But welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, if you said Michigan State, we would have had to redo the whole thing all over again.
Oh, yeah. I think thank God we're not a live show as well, that we could have done that as well. But the thing is, I've been to Michigan. Like, I'm a Ohio State Buckeyes fan and have been since I've been 7 years old. So I'm smart enough to know the difference between Michigan State and Michigan. Obviously the two, but obviously you guys are in the UP.
Yeah.
And you also went to the same school that my idol, Tony Esposito, number 35, won a national championship as well. And you were good enough last week to send me some pictures in the lobby of Esposito's plaques as well. So kudos to you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I wanted to do is I wanted to basically have you on the show. Like I said in the intro as well, I just love your content. I think that you bring a different, more digestible set of tools to the table based on science. I love your mantra about, take the feelings and emotions out of goaltending, and then substitute that with, what are so's of goaltending as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never been a math and science guy at all. Like, my entire life, I suck at that. I'm an English guy. So for that point there, like, when you started giving us the 4-foot rule back to the crease, where you are at top of your crease, middle of your crease, tall goalies versus short goalies, that really resonated with me as well. And I thought to myself, a lot of guys need to hear this stuff as well, because there's so much content out there on people's opinions on goaltenders, and opinions are kind of like belly buttons. Everyone's got one. But I thought we'd just start with you. And before we get to that point there, why don't we start a little bit with your journey, and you can just introduce yourself to the audience as well, of like how you got to where you are right now, why you got there, and why science is so important to you.
Yeah, well, it's a long journey, all things considered. Started playing hockey super young, typical Canadian kid. Grew up in Caledonia, Ontario. Started as a forward. Ended up making the transition to goaltending when I was like 11 or 12-ish, so a little late start. Fortunately, Southern Ontario is a goalie hotbed, and I got hooked up with a really good goalie coach named Derek Boujan, who I trained with my whole life. And training with him, I tell people he's way smarter than I am. He's just not as good at social media than I am. And so I get a lot of the accolades when we collaborate on a lot of stuff. But ended up getting drafted to the OHL out of minor midget. Never ended up going. Ended up playing junior hockey. Had a pretty successful year. Won the RBC Cup one year when like Sheldon Keefe was the coach, owner, GM of Pembroke. Ended up getting a scholarship to Michigan Tech, where I am currently. So I played all 4 years. Right before I started college, I was drafted to the Winnipeg Jets in the last round of the 2012 draft. I'm getting old. I almost forgot what draft it is. And so I ended up signing with them out of college. Played in their minor league system for 2 years, signed with Charlotte after, bounced around, went to Europe. Not a super illustrious pro career. It didn't really go the way that I was hoping for it, but it's still a career nonetheless. And then when COVID happened, decided that it was time to hang it up. Ended up becoming the goalie coach here at Michigan Tech while I started and finished my master's in that year. And then the year after, I enrolled in physical therapy school. So I have 1 more year left, and then I will be Dr. Jamie Phillips, and then hopefully still goalie coaching too.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, as far as the physiotherapy side to that, it's a totally different tool in the goalie chest. I mean, obviously, if you're a goalie, you've got personal trainers on the team. You got guys who are actually keeping you healthy and moving all the moving parts as well. I don't think most of the goalies that I know, really keep up with that because it's a totally different, kettle of fish. So you having that added advantage to your tool sets, how has that changed your view on the position as being a goalie?
It's really helped me understand how the body moves a lot more. I mean, like I said, like I have all the strength coaching certifications in the world. I have my undergrad in exercise science. I have a master's in exercise science, but it wasn't until like going to PT school where, it's not everyone, especially athletes, when we think of physical therapy, it's always like orthopedics, like sports injuries and, ACL tears and this and that. With us, it's we get into everything and the nitty gritty from stroke, Parkinson's, all the different body systems and functions. I mean, today I had class and we were talking about fitting like prosthetics on people. And so it really gives you an understanding, and it allows you to learn how to think critically about the body. And that's something that I never did in terms of my own game as much as I would have liked to back when I played. And it's something that I like to bring into training my athletes, especially in the prehab sense. But, no one really wants to go to physio until they're injured. So it's always it's a good tool to have and to be able to help athletes recover from injuries, especially goalies. That's my passion. And with all the hip injuries and groin injuries that you see, if I can have a positive influence on that, then that's kind of the ultimate goal.
You see the word think critically. So I just want to kind of pause there for a second because I think that's such an amazing concept. I don't think there's enough awareness to that concept as well, especially with parents. So can you give us an example of what thinking critically is inside that goalie science world and how it applies, your point of view of how you see things? Because like, if you're able to pass that knowledge on to goalies, I think thinking critically is a muscle that we just don't use enough in the world. I don't want to tell you what to think. I want you to find out how to think, because that way you can solve your own problems yourself. And if there's a muscle there that needs to be exercised, I think we could all benefit from that.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, thinking critically, especially when it comes to the goaltending, is really understanding the why behind, why we do anything. And so I take that again from how we're taught in physical therapy. So you have a patient comes in and they have low back pain. Well, okay, but why? Is it, tight hips? Is it injuries? Is it a slip disc? Is it the way they're sitting? Did they work out? Did they deadlift? There's always millions and millions of things. And so you have to go through a proper checklist and evaluation and to figure it out. And so I like to approach goaltending in that way. I mean, in goaltending, there are a lot of black and whites, things that are objective and we can't change, and things we strive for, like obviously like skating, positioning, like angle, squareness, all that stuff. But then when goals go in, you'll often hear, I got beat gloves, so I need to take 100. You'll have a goalie coach say, like, I take 100 shots to your glove. Well, that's not necessarily fixing the problem. Why did that goal go in? Was the goalie off his angle? Were they off square? Was it because they slid about 5 seconds too early and recovered and their back leg was behind them and that messed them up? And there's so many things. I can go down a rabbit hole, but for me, it's trying not to see the game in black and white and really try to understand and dive deep with it. And that's the one thing I do with all my goalies that I train, especially I do a lot of remote work where we watch video and we break it down, because I like to watch and see and talk to them and understand what's going on. Was that tipped? How did you adjust? What was going through your brain? And so that way we can create like a much clearer picture And, in hockey and sports, everything is emotionally charged, and that's okay. Emotions are good. It's good to have those, but it's not good when it blinds you from things that it gets in the way, I should say. You'll have people have their opinions. If anyone ever reads any of my Instagram comments, it's like you'll have a lot of things, and you have people saying, well, I played 40 years ago and that's not how we did it, and therefore it's wrong. And it's just like, well, it's actually not wrong or objectively wrong. That's just an opinion. So whenever I do like opinion based content, there's a meme I always throw up, but I like to say that that's my opinion. And then when it's, when I'm talking science, talking objective measurements, things, that way I try my best. If there's a research paper on it, I try to cite that. Or if it's just math, then I include the visual pictures so that more people can get an understanding. And that way, because I have a tendency to sometimes talk over my own head, but often talk over other people's heads. And so I try my best to add visuals and speak as clearly so that a larger audience can understand, and that's easily shareable and easily digestible.
I think it's kind of funny that you said on your Instagram on the comments, like, oh, imagine that, people having opinions on social media. That's so weird. Like, especially the old school. I love the guys who talk about, well, that guy got beat because he's out on his knees. He's not playing the stand-up role like from 1972. And I'm just like, yeah. So
my favorite is definitely the like, yeah, I see your point and I agree with you, but I just don't like it. And it's like, well, you don't like what I'm saying, or you don't like that the math works? Like, what? I don't understand here. You don't have to do what I'm saying. I'm just saying that that's how it is.
Yeah, or at least bring something to the table as well. If you want to counter my math with your math, I'll totally listen to that, because like if it makes my theory better, then everybody wins. You know what I mean? But if you just bring an opinion, you can't quantify it. You're like, well, these are just my feelings about it. I'm like, well, what good are those? Like, because goalies. I mean, like, let's be honest. Like, there has to be something inherently wrong with us that we want to get hit by a puck that's an 8-ounce, reinforced piece of rubber that's vulcanized coming out our head like 80 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour, and we want to get hit by that. There's something inherently wrong with that. And yet, we have this mantra that say all goalies are a different breed. I got that my entire life. Oh, well, he's a goalie. Oh, he's a goalie. Oh, don't listen to him because he's a goalie. He's already a little bit crazy as well. And you take the emotional side of the sport as well, just getting beat. I mean, there's a lot of rejection that, we as goalies play. Red light goes on, Andre Rasico's got that terrible nickname like Red Light Rasico, because of the red light behind him. 18,000 fans will cheer when you make a mistake versus a forward can make a mistake and nobody cheers like that as well. There's a different mentality, obviously, to being a goalie. I want to talk about a little bit more in your side of like your mentality, your journey, your struggles as well. We're going to bring up a clip a little later on. But I thought we'd just talk a little bit about the position, about the mentality, the mindset as well, and then kind of combine that with what you've learned in your journey and what you're now teaching.
Yeah, so when it comes to mindset, I'll be honest, I often get asked by like a lot of goalies being like, hey, how can I work with confidence and all these things? And that's not my area of expertise. And I'm very open about that. I refer goalies to other mental coaches or sports psychs, just because for me, I'm a big believer in like scope of practice. And I find that too many people in the hockey world, because that's what I live in, go outside their scope of practice, and you'll have like strength coaches offering like mental advice when it's like, well, yeah, you're not really like, probably shouldn't be doing that. But the mentality thing is really important. And I can offer wisdom from experience and stuff and things that I did and that worked and what didn't work. But I think ultimately the best thing for me is I wish that I got hooked up with the mental coach that I worked with, Bob Broden. I wish I got hooked up with him earlier in my career than I did. I was one of those kind of the old school, like, oh, I faced a lot of adversity in the past, therefore I have all this resiliency. I'm going to make it, and no matter what. And then eventually there just became so many ups and downs. I just didn't have the tools to get around it. And it really started to eat away at my mindset. And some of that, there's still some of those lingering side effects to this day in terms of certain things, and like anxiety and a little bit of depression and all that stuff that carried over as a root cause of what I went through when I played hockey. And so I advise everyone to work with like a licensed or accredited professional and get the best help. It's one thing to ask your goalie coach, like, hey, I'm struggling to stop pucks, but it's another to be like, hey, I need some help. I have a lot of anxiety. You really need to seek out professional help. And I cannot emphasize that enough. And so that's why, like, I always refer, and I get frustrated when I see other coaches and stuff that really that's not their role and it's not their scope, try to use that to sell products, and I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, and I know that I've watched a couple of your podcasts talking about the mentality, the mindset aside as well, and I want to use that as a segue just to get into managing expectations, because you have a certain amount of tools in your reservoir that you're able to access as a goalie, as an athlete, and obviously we have strong suits. You know, you play to your agility, you play to your height, you play to your reflexes, your hand-eye coordination, all your training that you spend 40 years, in my life, because I'm 50. So I spent 43 years learning how to stop pucks, you know, angles, you know, technique, you know, hand-eye coordination, everything goes along that side. And then that works until it doesn't. You know, now I'm 50, my, you know, speed's broken down as well. My hip flexors have gone down, my knees as well, because I've been a butterfly goalie my entire life. Then it comes down to really managing expectations. And I think, and that's where I wanted to really go with this. Because obviously there's a mindset side and everybody has their own mindset. How do you find working with goalies now, even in your journey with managing expectations, controlling controllables?
You'll see a lot of goalies struggle with that concept right off the bat, is just understanding that, hey, like, you're not going to stop every puck every time. And if goals didn't go in, people wouldn't play hockey. And actually this season has had one of the highest goals against average in the NHL in a very long time. I don't know the exact number. My podcast partner, Ben, he's the stats guy, so I rely on him for that kind of stuff. But when it comes to expectations, it's the way I manage the expectations of kids is different than the way I manage my expectations of like my college and pro, my adult goalies, and then the parents. And so with my older goalies that are playing at a high level, I'm very straightforward with them. Like, you are not good at this, but that's okay. We will work on it. Or you are very good at this. We cannot rely strictly on this, but we need to change things. With younger kids, you don't have to tell them like that kind of thing. You see like, okay, this kid's not a good skater, so you just work on more skating without telling him he's a good skater, because you don't want to discourage him in any way. You have to also read your athletes. Some athletes, they take they take criticism positively, and some take it really negative. And so it's really important to understand, the goalies and the people. And then especially when it comes to managing parents and parents' expectations, that's a whole other thing, because it's usually their sense of their child's skill is so hyperinflated that you just have to be like, your kid is like 10. It's okay. Just relax. Just talk to me when he's 16, 17, and then we can tell you if he's going to be like a good goalie. But for right now, like, let's just have fun and let's not be too over the top. But I believe it's important to be realistic especially with parents and older goalies. And every goalie can get better to a degree. Like, no one's ever permanently stagnant, but it's being realistic in what things you need to improve on and how we're going to improve on it. That's where I like to think that I do a good job.
Okay, and I was going to ask you as well, like, when you went through your journey as well, being drafted by the Jets, obviously going through the minor pros, being called up, I heard one time you got called up like 14 times in a year on turnarounds as well. That's going to have a crazy amount of stress, of like perseverance, of everything that has to go into keeping your mind on task. Because, I mean, here's the one thing I do know is, like, we're all human beings. We all have our experiences. We all have our past. We all have our quirks as well. And then when you throw us into the, out of our comfort zone, where you have to, like, you're a big, tall guy. I could fit nicely in most overhead storage bins when I fly. So, I mean, like, even how you travel overnight, when you get there, somebody picks you up. In the minor leagues, you have buses, long trips. You have to do cooking for yourself as well. You don't have all the quirks in the pros that they have, the morning breakfasts and post skates and your little nap before your routine at night. So, like, when you're going through all that, how did you manage your expectations, keeping yourself focused, or there's life getting involved and there's hockey getting involved, and you have to show up on that ice, block everything out from your personal travel day, what you went through to get there. all the pressure that's on you, all the thoughts going on in your head as well, and just be able to manage those expectations, and then rinse and repeat.
I'll be honest with you, Chuck. I didn't do a great job at it, or as well of a job as I would have liked to. Like I said, I got hooked up with a mental coach in my second year pro, and that was only because it got to the point where I was like, if I don't get some help, then my career is going to be done after this. And it just comes down to, again, working with someone who knows what they're doing. If you don't have those tools yourself, managing expectations, and like really not like trying your best to live in the present moment and not live in the future. For me, I really struggled. Everything is like, I'm always trying to think 20 steps ahead. And even now I still do, but in your career, it can be hard. And when people ask me like what it's like, I say, imagine you get hired to your dream job and then fired 3 days later. And then just a continuous cycle of getting hired. So these super highs, and then getting fired when you get sent down. So these super lows. And you somehow have to manage this, and there's pay increases and there's pay decreases, and it's all these crazy things. And for some people, you have to support a family. Fortunately, I do this by myself. I didn't have those expectations or those added stressors, but it's just trying to play the long game, work with someone who can give you the tools to kind of solve those issues when they arise, and then just living in the moment. And that's the one thing, is it sounds very cliche, is to live in the moment and just breathe and focus and all that stuff. But it really is true, because when you live in the moment, you're not worried about what's going to happen. You're not worried about what has happened. You're only focused on the here and now. And that was easily my biggest struggle, was just like, it'd be like, oh, I'm getting sent down now, I'm never going to get called up, and my career's over. And then it would just be like just a spiral into despair. And I needed to get help in order to fix that. And I did, to a degree. I probably would have played longer had I gotten help earlier, but I was too stubborn to recognize that. And that's my own fault. And that's part of growing and learning as a human being, is, making mistakes and learning from them.
Yeah, I think that's even part of my journey inside of playing the position as well as you possibly can. I was lucky enough to play with a lot of former pros like Mike Gartner and Chris King and Mark Osborne. They had a 3-on-3 rink up in Newmarket, and we would play on Mondays and Thursdays. And my level of play could get me to a certain level, and then sometimes when I wouldn't play very well at all, I would just ruin the game. And we played games of 5, and then you'd have to deal with these. And these guys here were still 45, 50 years old. Gartz is a Hall of Famer, obviously, and you got to walk into that room and just kind of apologize to everyone by saying, hey, listen, I just didn't bring my A game to the table today. And it had nothing to do with stopping pucks, because my body knows how to inherently stop pucks. It's where my brain got involved, or just started to overthink. And I've got ADHD. I fought that my entire life, and I wish I could have gone back in time and had that been diagnosed, so that way somebody could have given me the cognitive behavioral therapy that I was able to use to quiet things down, to really kind of get in that zone. And just box everything out and just hyper focus, which is a really big tool for ADHD. But I just didn't have that at the time. And working with parents and talking about their kids is just finding out that mindset for them. And what I feel would have worked better for me is more practice, and just really gone through more routine. Because I never had the level of confidence that I think I should have trusted in my ability to stop pucks. And so that's where I want to kind of segue, is when you start training, you're training like an athlete, not a goalie. And if I would have had more repetitions, then I would have developed a lot more confidence, because repetitions to me, then if you watch Carter Hart in a crease, he's grease. He knows every edge work he has inside and outside. He's very good around his RVH and his post work, and positionally sound. And if you have that there, you have that basis for building confidence in small wins, right? So I thought we'd just talk a little bit about training like an athlete, not as a goalie as well, and how that works.
Yeah, repetitions. It's everything. And I find that a lot of younger goalies, I think just because of social media and that really quick instant gratification kind of culture, everyone really wants to do all these crazy extreme things all the time. And, you'll find that really good goalie coaches out there, they really emphasize with their goalies basics. And they don't get into the nitty gritty, the things that the pros do, until their goalies are at that age. And typically that age is 14, 15, 16, sometimes 17 years old before these goalies can start to really focus in on other stuff. But when it comes to training like an athlete and training like a goalie, that's actually the main reason that I hopped onto social media. I was trying after I retired, I had a little bit of resentment at the game. I tried to distance myself a little bit, and then I was training other athletes, and I had made a lot of mistakes in my own training where it was like you basically just try to mimic being a goalie on the ice, or mimic being a goalie in the gym, and it's really just not conducive to base any of the strength conditioning principles at all. And I wasted a lot of time and effort, and I see a lot of goalies will kind of go through that, and they don't get as strong as they could have been, or they'll struggle with a lot of injuries because they missed out on a little bit of athletic development. So for me, goalies aren't special when it comes to training. Like, goalies are athletes. Goalies need to be explosive, laterally, forward, strong. They have to be able to withstand force through the joints, and all that comes from just good, solid strength training. So the strength training that you do should look similar to most other athletes. Yes, there's going to be little different variables, but for the most part, like, just lifting heavy weights, be sprinting, being faster, jumping, like, all those things are what goalies should be doing. And there's a reason that for forever that goalies have always been like the worst on the team in fitness testing and all these things, or you can't do that because you're a goalie. Well, that's not how it should be. You can't be both the most athletic position on the ice and yet not train like an athlete. And for me, once I saw like a lot of the stuff that was going on the internet, and I was like, I gotta say something, because whatever, if kids are wasting their time and money on stuff, I can't do anything about it, but I can try my best to create a solution and offer programming and training that is going to make goalies better athletes. And when you take those better athletic traits like strength, power, explosiveness, and then when you get onto the ice, then you can do specific stuff, because there's nothing you can do off the ice that's going to replicate being a goalie on the ice. So for me, it's not about just, I'd rather take that time in the gym, get stronger, become just a great athlete. And then when we get on the ice, then we can worry about being a goalie.
And where do you see something like distinctly that difference between what you see the world on and in the science realm of training, of physiology, kinesiology, all of the science behind it, where you see distinctly that some people are getting it wrong, when it comes to the position and training for the position, training as an athlete and creating that agility? Because again, like, when I grew up, I'm 5'8", so goalies had to be quicker back then. They rely more on our angles. The position changed entirely from stand up to a butterfly during my teenagehood. I guess it was mid 80s or so as well. So what do you see differently in the position that you think most people are missing? You're like, hey, listen, we might want to have a look at this because this makes more sense longevity wise. Of course, long term, someone like Jonathan Quick, he's been having an amazing, run of his career, having an amazingly crazy style that has a big detrimental impact on his body as well. So, and obviously he's in the pros, and people use him as the exception to the rule as opposed to the rule as well. But what do you see that's different from, training positions where people are making mistakes and parents are not seeing this as well, where you think that your point of view adds more longevity to the position?
Ooh, that's a good question. So there's a lot of things in the way that I see the game that are both can be argued with science and argued with opinion. The first, I think, one you mentioned there is that the idea that all tall goalies are slow. I don't know why that persists, but there's at this point of age, like day and age, goalies that are in the NHL are high level goalies or elite goalies. They are all fast. Yes, some are faster than other, but the margin of like the difference between speeds is so small. Like, yes, you'll have outliers like a guy like UC Saros or Shesterkin or Vasilevsky, and those are the goalies at three different heights, and they're just ahead of the pack. But for the most part, everyone is so close in their skill. The second is that flexibility does not necessarily reduce the likelihood or prevent injuries. I see that all the time, and it's like, stretch, you'll prevent injuries. There is no conclusive literature to suggest that your flexibility is going to reduce the likelihood of injury. There's some evidence to show that being stronger reduces the likelihood of getting injured, but even then, you could kind of argue that. My bias definitely falls a little bit more in the strength side, but people are all like, you cannot prevent injuries, and I always see that, like, injury prevention. You just cannot prevent injuries, because if someone just crashes the crease and runs you over and blows your knee up, there is not an exercise in the world that you can do that's going to prevent it. So it's okay like to not hyper focus on that. And the third is that this idea that goalies shouldn't be strong. And I don't know why this persists, or that goalies shouldn't like squat heavy weight or do deadlifts or do anything like that. And like, we talk about the forces that are put on the joint, like you're in just the head of your femur into the socket of your hip, again and again, every time you push, stop, butterfly, it's just force. And your ability to withstand and be durable to force comes from your structural adaptation. This is Wolff's law. Your body is going to adapt to the demands that's puts on it. So if you're an athlete and you can squat, just say 500 pounds, you have the ability to withstand that much force over time. Do you need to squat 500 pounds to be a good goalie? No, absolutely not. But if you can, you're in a better position than someone who can't, in order to maintain that force. So if you're a goalie, if you're trying to increase longevity and increase resilience, whatever that means, the stronger you are, the more mobile, the more athletic you are, the better this possibility, the better success you're going to have as an athlete, and the less likelihood you will have of like an overuse injury or like a non-contact injury. And so that's where I kind of like, that's the hill that I'm going to die on. And a lot of people don't like that, and that's fine. It's just, there are some things that are objective truths in that, and that's just the way it goes. So that's how I train my athletes.
I don't think there's one thing that you said there that I would disagree with, like on any level. And again, I don't have the science background too, but it just makes sense. I mean, I had a conversation with Jonathan Quick during an All-Star game in the dressing room. We were talking, everybody else is all around. And I just said, hey, listen, I just want to get your take on your core. And I mean, Jonathan's got humongous legs. I mean, massive legs. If you're talking about like squatting 500 pounds, that's your cat. Plus he's doing Pilates and yoga and flexibility. And he just said something that blew me away. He's just like, you know what? Like, yeah, I have flexibility. Yeah, I have range of motion, and my position caters to that. But the reason why I do that is because when I'm down in a vulnerable position like that, I've got strength of core, and I minimize the chance of me getting injured by somebody falling on me. And I have that strong core, and that's the only thing I can control. I don't think because I have more flexibility that actually gives me, an immunity to these things. It actually doesn't. What does give me the more immunity or better percentage points in my back pocket is the fact that I'm stronger and my core is stronger, and I'm able to sit like that, and someone could fall on me and it wouldn't like make me go back, which would cause further injury or something like that as well. And I mean, obviously he's got, a completely different style of play. And even now at the end of his career, he's kind of struggling a little bit more with his mobility as well. But I thought we'd kind of segue that way with finding your technique. Because obviously, you're 6'4", I'm 5'8". What would work for you probably wouldn't work for me. What would work for me probably wouldn't work for you. So how do you work with your goalies or young kids, or even, while you're being a goalie coach with trained goalies, to really have them step up into their own abilities, be able to take that technique, kind of like, modify it, or give them better ability to play at that level, with kind of a hybrid role or whatever that works for them? And how do you find their technique?
Yeah. So when it comes to that, we'll talk about young goalies first. Is in terms of the principles of goaltending, there are, the black and white foundations that I mentioned before: understanding positioning, being a good skater, having some flexibility, having the ability to track and stuff, and read the play that develops over time. So you really, you focus on instilling the basics first, and then those goalies will develop their own style based on their body. Then as a coach, it's our job, or my job, or whoever's job, to understand, okay, we have a smaller goalie. What does that mean for him? Okay, they're going to give up more net just on appearance and in surface area, because you're smaller, you're objectively smaller, you have less size. Okay, what does that mean? Do they have to be more aggressive? Maybe. Do they have to have more depth? Possibly. Do they have to read the play better? Probably. They have to have all these other things. Or you take a tall goalie who's, let's just say, 6'6" and is a really good skater, but just not really flexible. Okay, so they're not able to make those huge desperation split saves. So what can we do to make sure that they're not in that vulnerable position all the time? Well, they're going to have to be a little bit deeper. They're going to have to manage their depth really well. They're going to have to read the game. They're going to have to anticipate. So it's understanding, like, finding problems that arise with every single goalie and figuring out how can we come up with solutions based on the tools that goalie possesses, and in those tools, as well as those anatomical differences and just their overall smarts and development and how often are they training and all these other variables that come into it. But it's just, there's no one size fits all. And so I tell, like, kids, I'll be like, I want to play like UC Saros. I'm like, okay, cool, but you should probably want to play like yourself. Like, there's a lot of things UC Saros does that are good, but you will never do them. So let's understand, what does UC Saros do that works well? Is there anything from his game that we can take? Can we? Okay, yes. Let's try to add that in. Does it work for you? Yes. Okay, perfect. No? All right, we got to think of something else. And so it's understanding that, everyone is their own unique person. So figuring out what works for them. Watch pro goalies. Don't try to replicate their game. Try to steal things from their game that works for them, if it's going to work for you. And that's the biggest thing for me. It's not trying to replicate goalies. It's trying to steal different tidbits of things and add it into your game if it works. But you'll see a lot of young kids will get hung up on ideas that they think they need this, when it's like, you can't do the splits, or you're 5'1", like, you shouldn't be in an RVH on the post, and that's okay. So we need to figure out how you're going to play in the post plays.
Yeah, there's a whole lot there that just for me to unpack with that, because I'm almost wondering, it would be the equivalent of being a sprinter, and then looking at someone like Usain Bolt, who's just like massively tall, massively agile, like world class, like the elite of the elite of the elite, the GOAT actually of sprinting, and saying, I want to do that. And then being able to say, well, like, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. Because, looking at someone like UC Saros, I mean, like, he's one of two goalies that I think in the NHL that are under 6'2" or whatever that is. And there was a podcast that you were on with Trav for Oilers, and you guys were talking about, have you seen him? Actually, we'll run that clip as well, because I want to talk a little bit about this, because I think it really kind of plays into managing expectations, because he's just not a person who's someone that you would model your game after, because he's so specialized. He's had to adapt his game because of his size and his height and his speed, and utilize all that. For you to say, I want to play like that guy there without putting in the work, I just think, to me, it almost bites a bit of arrogance as well, because you expect to have that ability without putting in, the 20,000 hours that guy's put in to his position as well, or the off-ice training program as well. Like, we just finished our junior season here. And now everyone's kind of taking a month off, and now they'll start their off-ice training as well, and putting that in. You can see in August and September the guys who put in the work. And those are the guys as well. So I think we just pull up the clip as well, Cam, if we can cue up the Toronto Oilers clip as well. We want to talk about UC Saros.
And then people will always be like, well, look at UC Saros and Dustin Wolf. They're small. Have you ever watched those guys play? They are so much better at everything than every other goalie, and that's what allows them to be able to succeed at that level, and that's okay. So if you're a smaller goalie, instead of feeling sorry for yourself, you have to work to build everything from skating, flexibility, to tracking, to reading the play. Every single attribute a goalie can have, you have to be better than a taller goalie at it, and that is just the reality. Just like if you're going to play in the NBA, if you're 6'3", you're going to have a hard time playing in the NBA unless you're like Steph Curry, who is absolutely money. And that's just the reality of it, because you have an advantage.
I know that's you talking there, but just give your thoughts on you talking there.
Yeah, it's whenever I talk about small versus tall goalies, this is when we get into the emotionally charged primal reaction. This is easily the biggest one, and you'll see like a lot of small goalies. It's actually typically parents of small goalies, and I understand it is frustrating, if your kid is good and they get chosen because you're just small, and I understand that. I can sympathize with that, but I the way that I explained it on a post a few weeks ago, or maybe last week, it's like a pie chart, and you have 100% of the pie. Okay, so height for one goalie is going to make up a larger percentage of the pie than it does for a smaller goalie. So that means that the taller goalie can have smaller percentages of all the other pieces compared to a small goalie who needs to have larger percentages of skating, tracking, play reading ability in order to equal that same size pie. And that's just the reality. And again, like, you know, UC Saros, Dustin Wolf, and Shesterkin's, I guess he's 6 feet, he's slightly undersized. Like, they are the exception to the rule. They're this 2 or 3 standard deviations to the right of the bell curve. They're so good at all the things. There's a clip on YouTube of like UC Saros at a development camp or training camp doing a skating pattern, and he is miles ahead of all the other goalies they have on contract. And it shows because he has to be, because he's small. He takes up less net. And goaltending is a position of taking up space. And as soon as I say that, everyone automatically comes up with this image of a sumo wrestler. Oh, like you're going to take up the most amount of space and they can't move. That doesn't make sense, because if it was, then everyone would be a sumo wrestler. No, your ability to move, track, read the release, manage depth, just be a goalie, all the basic goaltending fundamentals. All it does is allows you to take up space. And so if you're tall, you have an advantage because you take up more space. So if you're small, what else can you do, or what can you be better at to take up more space? And I guess a lot of people don't like that I say that, but it's true. And there's nothing if you're small, you get mad at your parents. Don't get mad at me.
I blame my parents all the time for everything. But you're right, man. Like I'm 5'8", and like when I would play with those pros, those guys would, like, if I wasn't literally on, to the square millimeter of my crease or where I was positioning wise, they'd just eat me up. And those guys are snipers. I mean, Mike Gardner can dot an eye at 20 yards wherever you want to go, and he'll put it there every single time like he's a puck machine. He's had 30 years of shooting pucks. And the other goalie I would play against, he was 6'3", and so he could get away with a little bit more of his positional being, but mine had to be on point. And the days I was not on point, I got ate up, and it's very frustrating because it's tolerances of millimeters, it's centimeters at some points. And as a 5'8" goalie, I can't help but defer to say, hey, listen, I'm 5'8", I take up less net. I need to be faster. I need to read play better. I need to have positionally sound, because if I don't, it's all over for me. And I don't blame anybody for that. I mean, that to me, like you say, it's an emotional conversation, and parents get involved with this. And I get that. I think it's a human condition where they just get defensive about their kid or about their genetics. And it's what human beings do. Like, we want to do that. But like when I heard you say that, I was just like, that just needs to be broadcast more and more, because it needs to sit in for these parents. It needs to sit in for these kids, because they need to know up front what they're getting into, because the tolerances are literally, at that level are minuscule. And if you don't do those things and execute them perfectly, and then you're going to go into resilience, because if you get beat consistently, if you're having a bad day, that's going to go to your mental state. That's going to come down, and now you're going to overthink that. You're going to go back and eat a tub of ice cream, and talk about your feelings, and work it out with your therapist or your goalie coach or whatever like that. And I laugh about this, right? But it's true, because we're human beings. We're emotional beings, that try and do things logically versus logical beings that do things emotionally, right? So I wanted to talk about, inside your technique, long-term goaltending, your view on that. I mean, I like that you brought this up as well earlier on, because I'm 50, like I said, and I've had to reinvent my positioning 3 different times in my lifetime. Once in the 80s, I was a Tony Esposito butterfly goalie. And then in the early 90s, it was paddle down, and Dominic Hasek came at that. And now it's all the lateral movement and slides, and the pads now are catered to being able to have that lateral movement and slides and RVH and all that as well. And I've noticed a huge difference in my body. My body doesn't respond the way it used to. And I can't do the same things. And recovery afterwards, I used to play in charity hockey games, 3-4 games a day. There's just no way I could do that anymore as well. So it's really about inventing a style now that I can use and utilize for the next 10 years that will allow me to enjoy playing, but still play within what my physical body will allow me to do longevity-wise. So I thought you could speak to that.
That is a good topic, and there is no one answer, right or wrong answer in this. And I think when we look at this topic, we have to think about goaltending itself as a position. And unless there are massive rule changes to the game in terms of the size of the net, or the equipment or anything. My personal belief and opinion is that this is almost the final form of goaltending. Like, the way that goalies play now is probably the way that goalies are going to play for a very long time unless the rules change. And I know people will argue about, everyone goes down too much or everyone spends too much time in the RVH. And everyone will complain about the way it should be or the way it used to be. Well, the game has changed and goalies have changed with it and they evolved. And the RVH is probably the most widespread, the newest iteration of goaltending. I know there's people have tried to push the Panda and all that stuff, which for me, it still doesn't make sense, but I digress. With that, you have to understand that the demands put on the goalie today is a butterfly, very heavy stress on the hips and knees and ankles. And so we need to manage our athletes better. And we think about, the best analogy is think about baseball. On a baseball team, there's a Major League Baseball team, there's 5 pitchers. They rotate every game. In Little League, there's pitch counts. And coaches get in a lot of trouble if their kids go over their pitch count. Yet we don't let little kids go out and throw a baseball 500 times a day, yet we have goalies go out and do 500 butterflies a day every single day, and we get mad at them when they don't do a butterfly. And that adds up over time. And I think a lot of that, and you see with the hip issues, and there's a really good paper by Tobias Warner out of Sweden, and he said basically expect your goalie, if you're playing in a pro level, expect your goalie to be injured for at least a percentage of the season. I think it was around like 28% of the season, so almost a third of the season, you're going to have an injured goalie. And so what can we do to manage that? There's a lot of things, and I have a lot of ideas. I don't know whether they're feasible or not. And another thing too is you'll see the question is it correlation or causation? So is it the butterflies causing more hip injuries, or is it the goalies that would have had hip issues anyways are the ones having issues, and the ones that weren't going to have them continue to rise to the top? And so that would be a very hard study to do and to prove, but there's probably the truth lies somewhere in the middle, where you're getting kids that will naturally have some sort of disposition to having injured, like FAI or anything like that, and they start playing a goalie at a very young age, and they do repetitive motion, and like I said before, will slaw your bones and are going to adapt to that, so you end up with impingement. And again, I think it all comes down to how are we managing, how are we training, are we giving appropriate rest? Are we encouraging kids to be players as well as goalies from a young age? Are we trying not to specialize super early? Load management. Are we skating for 2.5 hours a day, or are we just skating for 30, 45 minutes? Are we wasting precious butterflies on just flow drills that do nothing for anybody? Or are we using our time and resources and energy to do in-zone stuff like game-specific, power play, 2-on-1s, 3-on-2s, really making the practice count? And I hope in the future, as I progress in my journey and my career in coaching and physical therapy, to have a positive impact on like Hockey Canada and Hockey USA, to be able to create guidelines similar to how the major MLB does for their younger athletes in terms of creating some sort of program to increase longevity, because it's at this point now where there's just so many kids getting hurt, and I don't remember really anyone having double hip surgery when I was young, and I'm 30, and nowadays kids come up to me and their hips are hurting all the time, and you're getting kids like 14 years old with total hips, and it's like there's some red flags here. Why are we not doing anything about it? And hockey is always the last to change and adapt. It's just an old school mentality, old school sport. And, hopefully I can add a little bit of science to that, but I am concerned about a long-term health for a lot of goalies, because a lot of people are getting pretty beat up.
Yeah. That's one of the things I really got from your Instagram as well, is your ability to care about something that's so ahead of the curve that nobody else is really talking about right now. Which makes you distinctly different, because you bring, goaltending is one tool to the table, then you bring physiology to the other side, and you kind of combine both of them as well, where you're just like, hey, this makes sense, where you're talking about, physiology of the sport and where it's going and the stress it's putting on us. Like you mentioned in a podcast before about, pitchers having Tommy John surgery, the same thing with goalies as well. And it would just be like pretty logical to find the pathology behind injury and being able to be ahead of the curve and say, hey, listen, this is the data. This is what we're looking at right now. And I've got 2 junior goalies in my organization right now that are 16, 17, 18 years old, and they've got hip problems already. I'm like, really, dude? Like, I'm 50, and I don't have, hip problems like that as well. And again, I think people, they err behind caution because they don't want to be wrong. You know what I mean? They don't want to be wrong and then have this podcast come to bite them in the ass and be cancel cultured about what their opinion was. That wasn't, but I mean, science just evolves. I think anybody who bases themselves in science in the moment can say, hey, listen, the science was wrong and science got better. And we learned from that and we revolved with that. And it wasn't my opinion. My opinion was based on the science and the data that we had at the time. And that's the most important part of where we need to be able to adjust to. And that's what science does. We adjust, and that's how we better. And that's how progress has been made. I mean, if you look at the airplane, it was a terrible contraption when the Wright brothers had it. And somebody smarter than them said, hey, listen, what if we put flaps on it? What if we put a rudder on it? Like, what if we had a steering stick? And everything would, evolve because the science kind of caught up to the position. And I look at goaltending right now as in that right now we're at that crux because it's like the part where pitchers in the major leagues, before Tommy John came along, they coined the phrase Tommy John surgery. How many pitchers went under the I guess the injury of what Tommy John had gone through in his elbow, and now it's commonplace. We go through that as well. So before we go, I wanted to bring up a video that you had mentioned as well about struggle that really resonated with me because I think one of the things we don't talk enough about in goalies is being able to give them small wins. I think if we give goalies or even athletes for any matter, you give them small wins, then they get a little bit of confidence. Once they get some confidence, then they start to get in some mojo working for them. And then they start actually working a little harder because they're getting better results of it. And once they start working more at it, and they add more hours to it, more dedication to it, more hyper focus, then they start getting mastery levels of things as well, right? And I think one of the things, and this is just my opinion on this, is just like, I think most of the kids nowadays are just lacking a lot of perseverance and resilience. Someone like myself, like my dad was in the Army, I grew up with perseverance and resilience because that's the mentality that we had. And now it's about everyone has to have, participation banner and, you have to win at everything. And if you don't, it sucks. And there can only be one winner as well. But to me, it's the struggle. And I was watching a John Tortorella video about the Flyers, and he's saying, hey, listen, every single team that goes through struggles and comes on the other side and betters themselves, that's how winning is done. If you want to win, you got to struggle. There's the saying about the larva. If you were walking through the woods one day and you saw a little cocoon of a butterfly struggling to get out of that cocoon, and you wanted to speed up the process while you took your little penknife and you gingerly slit the cocoon, you would see the butterfly come out of this, and that'd be an amazing thing to see. But what you've actually done is you've killed the butterfly because it needed to struggle in that cocoon for hours to develop the muscles in its wings to fly away. And now, because you actually wanted to help the butterfly in your own little way to see it, you've actually killed the butterfly because it'll never fly. So I thought we'd just play this video for you in the podcast talking about struggle, and I'll get your opinion on the other side.
We have to just take one step back and say that out loud, right? I am not playing a 12-year-old or a group of 12-year-olds because this Tuesday night game in a community center, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
I love it.
I think if you're a young goalie listening, or if you're a parent of a young goalie, there is value in the struggle. And it sounds negative, but there is value in the struggle, and you learn a lot about yourself and your brain and how you handle these situations. And that will help you in other situations that are not as stressful or as taxing. Or if you give up 2 goals early, you have to learn how to, manage your thoughts. And
and I thought that was the point that you said that. So go ahead.
Yeah, that was a clip from the Goalie Science podcast I do with my partner, Dr. Ben Cernick. And he's my stats guy, so I refer to him for all things numbers. But there is value in the struggle, and there is a line between, of course, being so negative that you're discouraging, but also being so positive that you're reinforcing, bad habits or this idea that everything is going to be gifted. And you'll often see it in a lot of like really like high level athletes who have always been high level, where they've never had to struggle because they've been the best. And then when they get their first real major true setback, they really struggle to find themselves. And I think a good example of that is like someone like Ronda Rousey, who was undefeated, and then when she finally lost, she really couldn't get back, and her identity was messed up, and she struggled with a lot of things. And so we need to provide little wins to kids so that they stay motivated and they have things to look forward and they stay excited. But at the same time, we need to challenge them, and we need them to lose, because when you lose, you can look at what you did wrong and make improvements. And I think that that's really important. And like, again, there's obviously always participation trophies and whatnot, but allow kids to make mistakes and to learn from them, and don't be overly critical of those mistakes. Just talk and understand, hey, this is what you need to do for next time. This is what you can, and encourage them. And then when they get those little wins, they'll have achieved them on their own, and they'll feel a lot better about themselves. And hopefully that keeps them motivated. But yeah, everyone like wants it to be all sunshine and rainbows, and it's never going to be that way in sports and life. So don't shy away from the struggle, man. Like the only way out of it is through it. So to push through, find the tools. If that means reaching out to an expert's help, reach out to an expert's help. If you don't think you can do it on your own, that's really, really important. But once you get through the other side, you almost always come out a stronger, better athlete or a better person. And I think that's needs to be emphasized from a young age. And maybe we were talking about pulling goalies there. Sometimes if you have 2 goalies and you're playing U11 AAA, kid gives up 8 goals, just let him play the 8 goals out. He'll learn. Mm-hmm. He'll learn. And he'll get better. So you don't have to pull him after 2 goals in the first period. Also, you're playing U11 hockey, so if you're pulling anyone, like we need to look in the mirror a little bit. Yeah, but you just allow kids to struggle and figure it out themselves, and they're going to hate it in the moment. They're going to hate it for a couple of days after, but they'll move on and they'll learn. They'll be better from it.
And I think one thing that we as parents, like I'm a father of a 14-year-old daughter, but one thing I think that we're missing as well is like we just take the sport, insert hockey, baseball, football, whatever. We just take the sport and we make it all about the sport as opposed to the metaphor for success. I mean, I played varsity level volleyball. I'm 5'8". I had no business playing that sport. Went to a couple national championships as well. We got a bronze medal. I had no business being there. And I learned more from being an undersized guy playing volleyball in success of, how winning was done, and the struggle, like you said. And I think parents right now really have to get out of their own egos and just realize that if your kid gets confidence, if your kid works hard at something and finds goal setting and becomes a great teammate, they will be a better entrepreneur, a better student. They will have better listening. They will be better partners in their relationships. They'll be better employees when they go out and be employable. Learning the algorithm of what work ethic is and dedication is and hyper-focus and all the things that the sport is going to teach them in the sport. But spin that away and use that for life, because it's the metaphor that life after hockey finds us all. It finds you at 30, finds me, I'm 50. I'm still, trying to cling on to my youth. But yeah, I'm not winning anything at this level here that's going to make me feel validated anymore. Now you're just playing for the love of the sport. But the sport taught me everything about how to be a better person, how to control my emotions, especially being a goalie, because I just couldn't do that. I couldn't control my emotions, and it was everywhere in my life. It was in my relationships. It was in my education. It was in my ability to have employees and be able to communicate effectively with them as well. So please, parents, for the love of God, have your kid go into sport, but at the same time, understand the sport is just there to support your kid in order to have confidence and have them be a better person after the sport. Your thoughts on that?
No, I think you're exactly right. And, the percentage of kids that are going to make it as a career in sports is so small. Doesn't mean you shouldn't try, but the life lessons and the friends you make and the skills from athletic to cognitive and all this, the communication and the ability, and it sounds weird, but the ability to banter and to, when you get someone makes fun of you, to be able to handle that and to be able to just live, like, everything, like, sports imitates life in so many aspects. And so again, it's just like, it's expectations for parents where it's like, your kid is playing because they enjoy it. Hopefully you enjoy it as a parent, you want to support them, but understand that some of the kids are going to go on far and some of them aren't. But if they learn to be better people at the end of it, then it was totally worth the time and financial investment. And then not only the benefits of physical activity, and that's a whole other podcast, but yeah, I think there's a lot of value in that. And it's unfortunately, sometimes parents get so consumed in it and they want their kids to be good. And it's usually always out of best intentions, but it can be overwhelming, or it can have a negative impact in the end ultimately. So it's tough, and I'm not a parent, so it's easy for me to sit here and say, but hopefully when that time comes, I like to think that I'll just let my kid play the sport and support them financially in whatever they need.
Yeah. And I think that's obviously something I learned from my dad. My dad was a hard ass. He's a military guy. Wanted the best for me. Worked me really, really hard. I had great work ethic, and I loved the sport. And I took it as far as I could have taken it at the time. But again, that was just the physical side. I would have benefited immensely from being able to control my emotions. How I used to yell at my defenseman. I mean, if I ever have a defense, first of all, let me apologize to any defenseman that ever played for me right now while I have the opportunity, because I'm truly sorry for who I was or what I did when I said that. Because it was easier to blame the defenseman than look internally at myself and see where I was inept at that, or where I just didn't come up with the save. And then my ability to feel judged by everybody else around that saw that and make me think that, I was off my game or whatever that was. I was a train wreck that way as well. So that was one thing I think as parents, I would have benefited from, with that as well. Before we go, I wanted to kind of throw a shout out to Padskins as well, because they're a company as well that I think me as a goalie, I really saw value in Mark's creation at Padskins as well, simply because if you give goalies small wins, when they start off and they look cool and they look the part and they feel like a pro, then they have a better chance of playing like a pro. And I had to change my gear as well. And, there are certain pads that fit a 5'8" guy. And I was really lucky that I was able to go in, buy an off-color set of pads and then customize it to what I wanted with Padskin. So you can go on their website and check out what color schemes you want. I was down in the States on a 7-team NHL tour in the fall, and Mark was generous enough to donate all these Padskins for all these minor hockey associations that we went to in Carolina and Hershey and Philadelphia and Nashville and St. Louis and Columbus. So he was generous to do all that too. So I thought we'd just give him a shout out as well. And then if you want to be able to have your kid feel like a pro, check out that website. I think it's great just to give them the resources for that as well. And they're cheap as well. I mean, it's a very inexpensive product. It's really actually quite fun to actually customize your gear, whether it be your mask or your pads and your gloves as well. Before we go, I wanted to ask you what kind of fit for people that are watching this podcast and are looking at your website and seeing your shtick and see if there's a fit for them to work with you, where they can find you, what type of fit you're looking for, or what you think you could bring to the table. Because obviously you're not going to be coaching everybody, but like what you could contribute to parents' kids and their development, and where that might be a fit for them and for you.
Yeah, so if anyone's looking to get in contact with me, there's two ways. Probably the easiest is my Instagram, which is at JamiePhillips30, or my website, which is phillipssportsperformance.com, and you'll be able to just shoot me an email. I work primarily with goalies. My youngest, I tend to train goalies that are like about 14 and older. I do have programs for younger goalies, but honestly, when you're younger than 14, you probably don't need my services. I can make goalies better athletes, smarter and better goalies, and that's what I do. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for good people. I always interview everyone I work with one-on-one, because for me, I can make someone a better goalie. I can get them stronger, more athletic, but I can't make you a better person. And so for me, I want to enjoy the athletes I work with. And so I'm very, very particular with who I train. And so if you're an athlete who wants the goalie, wants to get better, wants to get faster, have a great off season, great in season, reach out to me. We'll set up a meeting. We'll talk. We'll see if I'm a good fit for you, if you're a good fit for me, and we'll go from there.
And what type of athlete are you looking for to work with as far as mentality wise? What you're saying, there's a fit. Obviously, your X's and O's, your physiology and what you can teach that. What's a better fit for you personality wise, and what works for you, and where you feel you're able to work with the kid?
Someone who's just wants to work hard, wants to listen, wants to learn, wants to ask a lot of questions. I love answering questions if someone doesn't know how or why we're doing something, and someone that doesn't make excuses. It's hard, or parents that make excuses or kids that make excuses. That's just, I'm not here. I'm not here to play the politics of the blame game. I'm here to get you better at your position. And I want someone that's willing to just do whatever it takes to get better. And if they go all in on me, I go all in on them. And that's kind of how I operate.
And before we go, I just want to give you a chance just to acknowledge people in your journey that have gotten you where you are. I think I always used to say things about teachers, whether they be in the education system or on the ice, or mentors or friends. But I'm everywhere in my life right now because of those people in my life that got me to where I was. I mean, you as a teacher, as a coach, you have to see and recognize the greatness in the kids before they might actually recognize it in themselves as well. So I thought I'd just give you a quick second just to acknowledge the people in your life that got you where you were and who you wanted to thank.
Yeah, that's good. I'd like to thank my parents, obviously, for supporting me from the very beginning. Derek Boujan was my best friend and goalie coach. I would not be where I am today as both a goalie and a coach and a person without him. Bob Broughton, my mental coach, who got me through a tough 3 years, my final 3 years of pro. He worked a lot and listened to a lot of the mental stuff going on in my brain. And I think I just want to also thank all the goalie partners I've ever had. If they're listening, just because, we battle, we go head to head, and we've always found a way to support each other. And I've always been appreciative of all my goalie partners.
I've never heard anybody thank a goalie partner. Well done for you, man, because you're right. We battle, we want the ice time. I love watching Allmark and Swayman from Boston and how they celebrate after every single game together. That warms the cockles of my heart because I certainly never had that in my life. And I direly wanted that. I wanted to actually cheer for my backup, or when I was the backup, for someone to cheer for me as well. And I think we just take it way too seriously when it comes down to, the competitiveness and our identity attached to that as well. So kudos to you for actually, throwing a shout out to all your goalie partners as well. I think that's amazing as well. So any last thoughts you wanted to leave our audience before we go?
No, just thanks for listening. And like you said, approach goaltending with a critical mindset, think critically, look for help, seek help when you need it. And if you need help, reach out to me because I'm always there to provide insight and guidance whenever I can. And if I can't, I will refer you to someone who can.
I think that's the reason why I was just so attracted to your Instagram as well, because you just have this level of authenticity that I think that you just get it and that you actually give a shit, you care. And if it's if you can't bring it to the table and, sometimes I'm not for everybody, but we can get you somebody else who might be able to be better fit for you and move that as well. And then that way you get the attention that you need and everybody wins. It's people helping people. It's powerful stuff as well. So Jamie Phillips, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. Been a big fan of your work as well. And I encourage everyone to go on Jamie's website as well, which we've included on the links here, and as well as his Instagram. His Instagram is actually really cool. He actually quantifies and puts reasoning behind everything. I think that even if you just weren't a goalie and you actually watched it and you just wanted to snipe on goalies and just figure out some stuff that they're doing, you can learn a lot from that as well. So Jamie, thanks a lot for being on the show. Wish you all the best, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks.
You bet. That's Jamie Phillips. I have been waiting for a couple of weeks to get a hold of Jamie to have him on the show as well. And just really wanted to thank him for being on the podcast today. I want to bring up my amazing producer, Cam LaRock, and see what Cam's thought is.
I'm glad you called me amazing, even though we had a few technical errors today, but we got through it. The show was great. They're always great, Chuck. But I'm glad you guys talked about the struggle and the importance of the struggle within the game of hockey. Your sports in general, sports is where I learned a lot of the human skills that I learned to this day, including how to deal with loss, or how to deal with just the ups and downs. How to carry yourself afterwards. So I'm glad we were able to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think honestly, I keep coming back to this as well. If you're talking about the sport you're really missing the point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what it really comes down to is like we're raising young athletes, whether they be female or males, and what we're teaching them is work ethic, how to be a better partner, how to be a better employee, how to be a better entrepreneur, how to be a better citizen out there, better fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, all these things as well. And we just use hockey as the hook in this case to teach these kids these life skills, and I think that's the most important part. And I really like Jamie's take on the struggle as well and moving through all that. Because again, like if you don't have resistance in life, you're just not growing. If you're not growing, you're not really living. And it looks a little bit like rejection or fear or anxiety or all these things that are coming up. But if you really kind of look at the nuance of the struggle and what's there, I always find there's always red flags that I've missed or off ramps that I've not taken where I could have taken off. And the awareness, knowing where to be, has really changed my perception of how I've been able to get past that as well. Because life's going to punch you in the face.
Yeah.
Over and over again. It's never going to stop.
Doubt.
How you react to that, which is the biggest thing as well. So we want to throw a thank you to Holy Chuck Burgers, our title sponsor as well, and Mark Anthony for being able to create this, which obviously doesn't happen without product. And Maxwell Clothers as well, who's always been very generous and dressing me up and making me look like quasi-professional. So thank you all for coming as well. And thank you for tuning in. I realized that you could have been anywhere today. I want to thank you for joining Jamie Phillips and myself talking about hockey goalies mentality struggle. And if you like this, share it, comment, like it, and then the sharing is caring. People helping people with powerful stuff. So we will see you next time.